continuing with the laws of Sukkot, and we are on Taf Reish Lamed Tes Ches, which is 639.8 in the Mishnah Berurah. So we've been talking a lot about what happens if it rains on Sukkot, especially the first night, the second night, and it looks like, thankfully, we have B'liai and Hara, a good forecast, at least here in central Jersey. So Manalapan should be without rain. I'm very excited about that. Saves us from a lot of issues. Today we're going to talk about the blessing that is made on the Sukkah. Leishev b'Sukkah. Every time there's a mitzvah to eat in the Sukkah, to live in the Sukkah for the 7 days of Sukkot. And when we do mitzvahs, we make blessings. So when exactly do we make the blessing of eating in the Sukkah or living in the Sukkah? So Taf Reish Lamed Tes Ches. Nagu she'ein mevarchen al Sukkah ela b'shas achila v'hachi nog. The Shulchan Aruch says the custom is, excuse me, that we only make a blessing on the Sukkah when we eat. Even though there's a mitzvah to live in the Sukkah, to study Torah in the Sukkah, to sleep in the Sukkah, the only time we actually make a blessing is before we eat, and we're going to see that it's not when we eat everything, only when we eat from the 5 grains, or when we wash and we make hamotzi, we have bread. Let's see what the Mishnah Berurah has to say. No, Garotza Lomar, after Medina de Gemara, Ladas Poskim Rishonim, Kishaverach B'Sukkah V'yatza Lasas and Yanav L'Lachzer Takef Be'inyin Shahai Yetzia Gemura, V'im Kain Harei Yesich Daito Min HaMitzvah, Kishiyach Zarach HaKach Tzarech L'Var Shenis V'Afilo Me'apam B'yom, V'Mashenichnas Afal Pi She'en Aleich Sham V'Varach. I'll translate in a second. Sharigam Haishiva Amida Sham Hi Mitzvah Dehavi Ke'ein Tadur. He says, even though there are early commentaries that say that when you go into the Sukkah and you leave and you come back, like a real leaving, you don't just go out for a second, but you leave and come back and you're not eating, they hold you would make a bracha. That's what some rabbis hold, because even sitting and standing and just hanging out in the Sukkah is a mitzvah on Sukkot. Right? If you have a choice of studying Torah in your house or studying Torah in the Sukkah, you should study in the Sukkah, because that's also a mitzvah. Yet, and these rabbis would hold that even just being in the Sukkah, you would make a blessing even if you're not eating. He says, nevertheless, even though these rabbis hold that, however, the custom is that we hold like the opinion that says that the only time we make a blessing is when we actually eat in the Sukkah. So even though it's a mitzvah to sit in the Sukkah, stand in the Sukkah, spend time in the Sukkah, sleep in the Sukkah, study in the Sukkah, the only time we actually make a blessing is when we eat in the Sukkah. Even if we sit in the Sukkah before we start eating, let's say an hour, a certain amount of time, right? You're hanging out in the Sukkah before the meal. So maybe you would think to make a blessing right at the beginning. No, we don't do that. The blessing that we make on the eating, which let's say could be 15-20 minutes sitting in the Sukkah, then 15-20 minutes later we make the blessing. That blessing that we make on the food will cover your sitting in the Sukkah before that, and he's bringing this up here because usually we make a blessing before we do the mitzvah. But here, since the main mitzvah is the eating, or the blessing that we say is on the eating, so we wait even though we were sitting there for several minutes before. If you plant a shena v'atil v'halim, and the blessing that we make on the eating is going to cover the sleeping, the learning, and anything else we're doing in the Sukkah. Because gam dasa poskim harishonim v'lo leishev kach b'li bracha v'alkein takef b'vom v'esakez yivarach al davar shehu mechamisha minim v'yachol menu me'ad yosem mekabeh v'yivarach leishev b'sukkah v'lo yivarach ar kach b'shas achila. He says, really, what the best thing is to do, since we have these opinions of these rabbis that say that you would make the blessing even without eating, the best thing to do, he says, when you come home from shul and you want to sit in the Sukkah, to have a little bit more than an egg's volume of one of the 5 grains, and eat that like a cookie or something like that, more than an egg's volume of a cookie, have kiddush or something. And this way, if you plan to sit in the Sukkah, you can make a blessing right at the beginning when you eat a little bit, so that will cover your eating and then sitting in the Sukkah, and then when you eat your meal, you would not make a leishev after, the blessing after. Okay. El b'shas, v'im berech pam achas b'shas achila, v'lo yatzim misukos l'asas asakov, v'afim yatzim misukos arak shahayidai talachzor miyad, ein sarach levar shenis leishev asukah, afilu im achal suda shnia, kemen shemitzvah achas hi. ולכן מי שיוצא כל יום בסוכה, שמלא בסוכה, ומיspal sham ve'en yotze l'shemesek rakadai telach miyad ein tzarich levarich. He says also here that somebody who has a meal in the sukkah, and then he just stays in the sukkah the whole day and doesn't really leave. The only time he leaves is, maybe to go to the bathroom for like a minute or something. He really is hanging out in the sukkah the whole day, and he's been there since breakfast. Breakfast, he made a bracha, and he's been hanging out, learning in the sukkah the whole day. And then lunchtime comes, he says he would not make a second blessing when he's eating lunch. But he comes out in the end that if you left for a decent amount of time, if you left to, let's say, go to shul, when you come back, you would make a second bracha. He says that this whole debate we're having when you make the blessing, that we hold that you only make the blessing on eating, is if you're actually eating. But let's say someone's not eating. Let's say he's fasting for some reason. It's not so geschmack to do on sukkahs. Or he doesn't plan to eat. Then he could make the blessing when he's just sitting in the sukkah. But normal folks on sukkahs, we wait till we eat to make the blessing. L'sham v'loshav achar kach miyad afilu hachi tzarich levarach sham leisha b'sukkah the halicha have hafsik. The Magen Avraham says, let's say you are eating in your own sukkah and then you're going to your friend's sukkah. So he says you should make a second bracha when you go to your friend's sukkah. V'alkenim rotza lachal b'sukkah zu davar she'asu lachal chutz l'sukkah tzarich levarach sham leisha b'sukkah amnan hu l'shitaso az b'simchas alumesh kasavra. However, that was the opinion of Magen Avraham. From das kam achronim the halicha lo have hafsik im hay b'daito ein tzarich levarach sofik brachos lahakel. He says what you should do, he says we don't necessarily go with the Magen Avram's opinion. So let's say, very common, you're eating in your sukkah and you're doing a sukkah hop. So do you make a leishev every time you go to your friend's sukkah? He says no, you don't do that. What you should do is that you should make the leishev, the bracha, in your own sukkah, and have in mind that you're going to go to other people's sukkahs, and then you would not make a second bracha when you go there. וברוך ברכות המזון יכול לברך שגם הישיבה היא מן המצווה דמאכילה ואילך כל זמן שיושב הווה הכל כביס אחד ומכל מקום כל שעדיין לא ברך ברכות המזון יברך ויאכל מעט. He says, let's say you're eating in the sukkah and you forgot to make a leishev b'sukkah. What do you do then? So he says, even if you're already benched, you can make a leishev b'sukkah because you'll still be sitting there. But he says that let's say you didn't bench yet, you should make a leishev and then eat a little more. We're going to stop here and wishing everyone a beautiful, beautiful sukkah. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out.